You ever heard of a place called Dunwich Hollow? Most haven't. It's not on any modern maps. No signs on the interstate, no population records, no postal code. But 40 years ago, it was a thriving little town in rural West Virginia. Then, one night, every man, woman, and child vanished without a trace. No wreckage, no screams, just silence and a few blood-stained clues the authorities buried deeper than any grave. I didn't believe the story either, until I went there. I first heard of Dunwich Hollow from a tattered man sitting outside a diner in Fayetteville. It was the middle of autumn, and the fog seemed to spill from the mountains like ghosts searching for a home. The man, Howard, had the look of someone who hadn't slept in weeks. His eyes were clouded, like he'd seen something no human was meant to witness. He grabbed my arm as I passed and said, "Don't go up the old forestry road. The Hollow don't like strangers." Naturally, I was intrigued. I'd come to West Virginia on a freelance assignment for a small urban legend podcast. They paid crap, but stories like this, these were gold, especially if I could be the one to finally uncover what happened. Dunwich Hollow wasn't in any modern records, but few archived news reports from 1983 spoke of it briefly. A coal mining town that went quiet one night. The official story? Toxic gas leak. Evacuation and disbandment were the words they used, but there were no evacuees, no documented survivors. And when I contacted the original newspaper, they claimed the article never existed. Something wasn't right. I rented a beat-up Jeep from a guy named Reggie, who warned me not to take it up them old hills after dark. I nodded, promised to be careful, and ignored the dread clawing at the base of my spine. The road to Dunwich Hollow wasn't even paved anymore, just a winding, moss-choked trail barely wide enough for the tires. Trees loomed on either side like watching figures, and the deeper I drove, the less sound I heard. No birds, no wind, just a dull, crunching rhythm of gravel beneath rubber. After about an hour of driving, I found it, or what was left of it. The sign was still there, barely readable. "Welcome to Dunwich Hollow, EST 1902. The paint was flaked and rust devoured the metal like a disease. Beyond it lay the remnants of a town frozen in time. Buildings half collapsed, windows broken, roofs caved in. Nature had begun its reclamation, vines snaking through crumbling brick, trees sprouting from concrete. But the eeriest part? It looked like people had left in the middle of their day. A diner table still had moldy plates and untouched silverware. The school had textbooks scattered across desks, a lesson half written on the chalkboard. And in the church there were shoes, dozens of pairs, lined neatly along the pews, like people had removed them before kneeling. But no bodies, no bones, just this unsettling silence that seemed to hum beneath the skin, vibrating in the bones. I set up my camera and started recording. I walked through the town square, documenting the decay, talking softly for the mic, trying to sound calm. But everything in me screamed to turn back. The sun was beginning to set behind the hills, casting long shadows that stretched and bent in unnatural ways. Then I heard it. Footsteps, not echoing behind me, but in front, around the next corner. I froze, breath catching. The camera picked up the faint, rhythmic sound. Then came a whisper. Not a voice exactly, but more like a breath brushing the back of my neck. I turned, heart pounding. No one. I sprinted to the center of town, the camera bobbing wildly. I didn't stop recording. I couldn't. Something had shifted in the air. The temperature dropped, my breath visible despite the mild October weather. The sky above had turned a deeper shade of gray, like dusk had come early and unnaturally fast. I ducked into a house near the edge of town, a two-story colonial that still had lace curtains in the windows. Inside, the air was stale, dust thick enough to choke. And yet, the TV was on. Static. That wasn't possible. There was no electricity in Dunwich Hollow. The power grid had been disconnected years ago. The camera captured it all. The flickering screen, the doll sitting motionless on the couch, its glass eyes seemingly tracking me. I walked further into the living room, drawn toward something. The static began to shift. Patterns in the noise. Words. Still here. I backed away, nearly tripping over an overturned coffee table. Then the upstairs floor creaked. Once, twice, something was up there. I bolted from the house and ran back into the street. But something had changed. The road was gone. Not covered. Gone. Where the path had once been was now dense forest. Trees twisted together like they'd been growing for decades. My Jeep, the trail, the sign, they were all gone, as if they'd never existed. I was trapped in a town that officially didn't exist, with no roads in or out, and night falling fast. I kept the camera rolling, narrating every detail, every noise, every whisper. The last thing I remember recording that night was a figure, standing in the window of the church, not moving, just watching. Then the screen went black. Not the camera's battery. Something else, like the darkness had swallowed the lens itself. And I heard it again. A whisper, but this time louder. You came looking for us. Now you'll never leave. I don't know how long I was unconscious. When I woke, it was still dark, but something had changed. The town looked newer. Not pristine, but less ruined. The buildings weren't collapsed. The church door stood open, and from somewhere in the distance, I heard a child's laughter. But there were no children in Dunwich Hollow. Not anymore. And that's when I realized whatever happened to them was starting again. And this time, I was part of it. The moon had risen high above Dunwich Hollow, casting silver light over rooftops that shouldn't have been standing. When I stepped out of the house, it was like I'd entered a photograph from 40 years ago. The buildings, once half-eaten by rotten time, now stood strong, their wooden frames polished and their glass windows intact. But I hadn't traveled through time. I knew that what I was experiencing, it was a memory, or a haunting, a residual echo of the town, preserved in some purgatory loop, replaying its last moments before it vanished. I wasn't just seeing the past. I was inside it, and it was aware of me, a living ghost town. As I walked toward the center town, I passed people, actual people. They didn't speak. They didn't even blink. They went about their day as if I wasn't there. Shopkeepers sweeping their storefronts, a mother hanging laundry, a boy riding his bicycle in slow, mechanical loops around a fire hydrant. Their movements were wrong, like clockwork, repetitive, rehearsed. When I got too close to one, a mailman placing letters into an empty box, he froze. His head slowly turned toward me, his mouth gaping open far wider than it should have. There was no sound, no breath, just that grotesque, silent scream. Then everything around me flickered. For a second, I saw the town as it truly was, rotting and abandoned, with gnarled trees strangling the buildings and blood smearing the street signs. Then, just as quickly, the illusion returned. I kept moving. My camera was still recording, the red light blinking steadily. I whispered into the mic, more for my sanity than the audience. The town isn't just haunted. It's alive, and it's remembering. I made my way to the church at the end of Main Street. Earlier, I'd seen something in its window, a figure, watching me. The door stood open now, as if waiting. Inside, the pews were filled with townspeople, but not like before. These ones weren't frozen or mechanical. They stared forward with hollow eyes, mouths slack, hands folded neatly in their laps. At the pulpit stood a man in priest's robes, face hidden by shadow. He raised a hand. The congregation turned their heads, every last one of them, toward me. Then they spoke, in perfect unison. The sacrifice must remain. I backed up, stumbling into the doorway, and then they vanished. No fading, no melting. One blink, and the church was empty. Dust blew across the pews. A rat scurried under a collapsed altar. The illusion was gone, but I could still hear them. Murmurs, humming, the kind of low, melodic whispering that wraps around your brain and makes you question if it's even real. I ran outside, but the sky had shifted. It wasn't night anymore, but it wasn't day either. Just gray, still, colorless, a place stuck between moments. The boy and the bell tower. That's when I saw the boy again, the one who'd been riding his bike earlier. He stood near the bell tower, barefoot, wearing a red flannel shirt 2 sizes too big. His face was pale, his eyes darker than seemed natural. He didn't move as I approached, just stared. I asked him what happened to the town. His lips barely parted as he answered. It was supposed to be one every decade. That was the pact. I crouched beside him, my voice trembling. What pact? His gaze shifted toward the church bell above us. The bell keeps him sleeping, but someone rang it, too many times. Then, for the first time, I heard it, a low, hollow toll, distant but echoing through every bone in my body, not from the church's tower, but from somewhere deeper, below the town, beneath the earth. I asked the boy who rang the bell. He didn't answer. He just pointed at me, unearthing the truth. I fled the town square and followed a narrow alley behind the old barber shop. According to the old news archives, the coal mine had been sealed after a toxic leak. But if the town's memories were bleeding into the present, then maybe the mine still existed here. I found the entrance tucked behind a thicket of brush, hidden beneath an old wooden sign that read, Black Hollow Mine, Danger, Do Not Enter. The board ceiling had been pulled aside, like someone or something wanted me to go in, so I did. Inside, the air was thick and bitter, like breathing through a wet rag soaked in metal. The tunnel sloped downward, narrowing with every step. My flashlight flickered. The walls seemed to pulse, like veins carrying some ancient blood. Then I heard them again. Whispers. But now they were voices. Hundreds of them. Crying. Pleading. Then screaming. The corridor opened into a wide cavern, and at the center stood an altar, black stone, cracked down the middle, soaked with a rust-colored stain that could only be blood. Around it were symbols carved into the rock. Not words. Not anything human. And behind the altar, bones. Piles of them. Child-sized, adult-sized. Some ancient, some disturbingly fresh. At the far end of the cavern stood a mural, carved into the stone. It depicted the town, surrounded by a ring of shadowy figures. Beneath it was a date, October 31st, 1883. The original pact. That's when I understood. Dunwich Hollow had made a deal with something ancient, something deep, a sacrifice every 10 years in exchange for prosperity, protection. But someone broke the cycle, maybe by greed, maybe by guilt, and the deal turned sour. The town didn't just vanish. It was claimed, and now it was hungry again. I heard the bell again, louder this time. A shadow moved across the cavern wall, massive, crawling, wrong. I ran. As I scrambled out of the mine, the ground trembled. The trees above the town bent backward, as if something massive stirred beneath them. Lights flickered in every window. The townspeople stood in the street again, facing the mine, waiting, and then I saw them part, making way for something that was coming up from the earth. I didn't look back. I just ran, the whispering rising to a scream in my ears. When I finally reached the edge of the town, where my Jeep had once been, there was nothing, just forest, endless, suffocating forest. Dunwich Hollow wasn't letting me go. Not yet, but I still had the camera. And as long as it was recording, maybe someone would hear this. Maybe someone would know what really happened here. And maybe they'd stay away. I hadn't slept. Maybe I couldn't. Something in this place, Dunwich Hollow, keeps time like a clock with shattered face. Morning never comes and the sky doesn't shift. It just lingers, that same heavy shade of ashen gray. A sunless purgatory, silent and breathless. The townspeople were gone again. The illusion, the echo, had faded, and once more the building stood half-collapsed and rotting. My only company now was a camera, its battery draining slowly as it documented the horror around me. I reviewed the footage from the night before. The boy's warning. The bell. The altar. But something strange happened as I watched. The footage began to warp. The image bled at the edges, colors bleeding into each other like spilled paint in water. Then came a new sound, one I hadn't heard during the actual recording. A whisper layered and overlapping, like a dozen voices all speaking over each other. It's not the town. It's what's beneath. The town's second life. I had to go back. Not to the mine, not yet, but to the library. Every town, no matter how small, has one. And Dunwich Hollow stood near the back end of Main Street, ivy choking its stone facade. The sign above the door was broken, but the carved letters still faintly read, Dunwich Public Records and Archives. Inside, the ceiling had collapsed in one corner, and mold crept across the old wooden floorboards like cancer. Rows of bookshelves leaned precariously, filled with water-damaged texts. Dust motes floated thick in the air, stirred only by my breath. But the back room, that was intact. A door marked Records stood slightly ajar. Inside were filing cabinets, yellowed newspapers, and boxes of microfilm reels. One cabinet stood out. It looked newer than the rest, as if it had been placed there long after the town's demise. It creaked as I opened it, and inside were folders labeled with years. I found the one I needed. 1983, the year the town disappeared. Inside was a single sheet of paper, typed with an old mechanical font. October 30th, 1983. Final notice. The selection has been made. The bell shall ring at dusk. All will bear witness. The hollow must be fed, or it will feed itself. No name, no sender, no recipient. Just a warning. The bell, it wasn't a call for worship. It was a trigger, a signal. I kept reading through the archive. Pages from older dates, some nearly a century old. Every 10 years, like clockwork, there are incidents. People gone missing, reports of unnatural storms, livestock found mutilated, children disappearing from locked rooms. And one name kept appearing. Thorne, Reverend Elijah Thorne. He was a town spiritual leader for decades. Supposedly died in 1963. But in one newspaper clipping from 1983, there was a photograph of him, standing at the pulpit 30 years after his death. Same face, same eyes, Unaged. I stared at that photo for a long time. Then I heard the bell again, the return of Reverend Thorne. This time, I didn't run. I followed it. The sound led me not back to the church, but deeper into the woods behind it, where the old trail to the mine had one split off. There, hidden beneath the collapsed stone arch, was a second entrance, older, carved with the same runes I'd seen in the altar room. I descended. The tunnel was colder than before, the air damp and foul, like meat left out in the sun. The walls glistened with some kind of black fungus that pulsed faintly with an internal glow, like it was alive. Eventually, I entered a chamber unlike the others, a subterranean chapel. Rows of stone pews faced a pulpit carved directly into the wall, where a figure stood motionless, arms raised. Reverend Thorne. He looked just like the photo, tall, gaunt, with hollow cheeks and sunken eyes that gleamed like dying embers. He didn't blink, didn't move. I thought he might be a statue, until he spoke. The hollow remembers. His voice was dry, cracked like brittle paper, but powerful. It reverberated in my chest. I asked him what the hollow was. His lips curled into a smile too wide for his face. It is a thing beneath, the hunger that sleeps, the God that dwells between seconds. We fed it to be spared. But you, he took a step forward. You've stirred it awake. Behind him, the mural on the wall began to shimmer. I stepped closer and realized it wasn't a mural at all. It was a portal, a rift, a place where the stone bent inward, riding like flesh, pulsing like an open wound in reality. And through it I saw eyes, dozens, hundreds, all blinking in perfect silence. They watched me, and something watched back through me. The hollow awakens. Thorne raised his arms higher, and the chamber trembled. The pews cracked and the stone groaned. I turned to run, but the exit had vanished. In its place, only more corridor, twisting, unfamiliar, as if the hollow was reshaping itself to keep me inside. My flashlight sputtered and died. The camera's night vision kicked in, black and white now, the world painted in shadows. I could see them, the people of the town, or what remained of them. They stood in the hallway, lining the walls, skin shriveled like paper, eyes hollow, mouths still moving in silent prayer. Then I realized they weren't spirits. They were alive, alive and trapped, their minds broken, their bodies preserved by the hollow's will. A warning surged in my mind, unspoken but clear. This is your future if you stay. Something hot pulsed in my chest, a vibration, I looked down. The camera screen was cracked, but still flickering. It was showing static, but with patterns, shapes, almost like a code. Then I heard the voice again, not from the air, but from inside the device. A child's voice. The boy. The bell must toll a final time. The exit, that wasn't. I ran again, deeper this time, the walls closing in, the whispering rising into laughter. The camera's feed began to show flashes of things not there or not meant to be seen. Children with empty faces, hands growing from the ceiling, a man hanging upside down, his mouth sewn shut with rusted wire. But then an opening, a narrow shaft of light, moonlight. I climbed toward it, scraping my hands raw on jagged rock. When I emerged, I was no longer in the woods. I was back in the town square. But it wasn't rotting anymore. It wasn't the illusion either. It was real, functional. People bustled through the streets. Laughter echoed. The air was crisp with autumn. I stood up confused, breathless. Had I escaped? Had I somehow traveled back? Then I saw the newspaper stand. October 30th, 1983. I hadn't escaped. I had arrived, at the moment before the vanishing. I was in the town the night before it disappeared. The final day. The last sacrifice. And everyone here was still alive, including me. But I wasn't the only new arrival. Reverend Thorne stood at the far end of the street, watching me, smiling, because now I was part of the ritual, and the bell was about to toll. The morning of October 30th, 1983 felt like any other, except I knew exactly how it would end. I was walking through a town already sentenced to death, surrounded by people whose faces I recognized from photographs, gravestones, and missing persons reports. They smiled, waved, lived their routines in perfect ignorance. Every gesture felt fragile, like the surface of water just before it shatters. But the strangest thing? They recognized me. An elderly woman at the grocer's offered me a slice of apple pie. A sheriff in a leather jacket tipped his hat and asked how I'd slept. Children darted past me in the streets, giggling, calling me Mr. Carter, which was not my name. The hollow wasn't just mimicking 1983. It had inserted me into it, made me one of them. I had memories I didn't own. Flashes of living in a two-story house with blue shutters and a collie named Dusty. They weren't dreams. They felt real, tangible. My mind was being overwritten like tape reused too many times. And through it all, one thought clung to me like frost. You are the sacrifice. The diary in the blue house. I found the house the children spoke of. Blue shutters, white porch, swing still moving despite no wind. Inside, the living room was pristine. Photos of a family on the mantel. One of them looked exactly like me, only slightly older. I searched the study and found a journal tucked inside a drawer, its leather cover cracked and soft with age, or maybe with use. Inside were entries written in neat, hurried penmanship. October 28th. They came again last night, the figures with hollow eyes, standing at the edge of the field, watching the house. Dusty won't go near the door anymore. October 29th. Reverend Thorne visited. He didn't knock, just stood on the porch and smiled. Said everything was ready. Said the hollow remembers. I don't know what that means. October 30th. I saw myself today, on the street. Same clothes, same face. He looked scared. I think I know what I have to do. That was the last entry. I flipped the page. There, scrawled in smeared ink, was one final line. Don't ring the bell. If you do, it begins again. I slammed the book shut, my heart pounding. It wasn't the bell starting the ritual. It was restarting it, over and over. A sacrifice caught in an endless loop. The eyes of the town. I stepped outside, and the street had gone quiet. Every person I passed now stood still, their eyes locked on me. Not accusing, not angry, just watching, like actors waiting for their cue. And behind every window, in every shadow, were more eyes. Hundreds, flickering, shifting. Not human. They were waiting for the bell. I ran to the church, desperate to reach the tower. If I could stop it, destroy the bell, maybe I could break the loop, end the curse. The front doors were already open. Inside, the pews were full. The entire town sat in complete silence, facing the altar, and standing beneath the crucifix, his hands clasped in mock prayer, was Reverend Elijah Thorne. His voice cut through the silence like a blade. "You cannot save them." I shouted at him, demanded to know why the town had to suffer, why the hollow needed to feed. He tilted his head, smiling like a marionette pulled by a cruel puppeteer. "Because it is older than God, and it is ours." He gestured to congregation. "We made a pact when the mine cracked open, and it looked back at us. You call it demon, a monster, but it is home." Suddenly, the floor beneath the pews began to tremble. The people didn't move, didn't blink. Cracks split across the church walls. The bell above rang once, on its own, and in that instant, I saw everything. The truth of the hollow, not in visions or hallucinations, but memories. Thousands of years ago, something crashed into the earth here, buried deep beneath the soil. A presence, a mind. It whispered to the first people, showed them impossible things, offered power in exchange for worship. Civilizations formed and fell, but the hollow remained. And when Dunwich Hollow was built atop the old mine, it awoke again. The town's founders knew. They fed it. Every decade, one person offered freely, and the town thrived. Until 1983. Until someone broke the cycle. The loop unfolds. I climbed the bell tower as the world fractured around me. The town was crumbling in flashes, whole buildings flickering between ruin and restoration, like a broken reel of film. The air felt too heavy to breathe, full of pressure like I was underwater. At the top of the tower, the bell waited, massive and ancient, with no inscriptions. But I wasn't alone. He was there, the other me, the man from the photos, from the diary. He looked tired, hollow-eyed. His voice was like mine, only worn. I rang it once, thought I could reset everything, save them. He stepped aside, motioning toward the bell rope. "Now it's your turn, but choose carefully. 1 toll wakes it. 3 binds you forever." I stared at the rope. My hands trembled. Behind me, the town was coming undone. Flashes of the people, sometimes as they were, sometimes as grotesque, bloated versions of themselves. Eyes in places they shouldn't be. Mouths split across foreheads. Elongated limbs dragging across dirt streets. I thought about walking away, about letting the town be swallowed, and the hollow consume what was left. But then I remembered the boy, his warning. The bell must toll final time. Just once. To end it. The final toll. I grabbed the rope, pulled. The sound was deafening, but not from volume, from weight. It rang through dimensions, through centuries. A note that fractured reality at its seams. The ground split open across Dunwich Hollow. A column of blackness erupted from the church foundation like smoke made solid. From within it, something began to rise, not with limbs or form, but with consciousness. It felt like drowning in thought, like being unmade by awareness. I stumbled back, the tower swaying beneath me, and then everything went white. I woke up gasping on cold concrete. The air smelled like mildew and earth. I was lying at the entrance to the mine, the real mine, rotting boards and rusted tools around me. No sun, no stars, just fog. I checked the camera, still recording. The town was gone, completely. The sign, the buildings, the roads vanished like they'd never existed. But carved into the stone wall, beside the mine was something new, a message. 1 toll was enough. But beneath it, scratched in jagged lines that looked more like claws and hands, was a second phrase. It will ring again. I don't remember walking back. One moment I was lying at the mine's entrance, the words "it will ring again" carved into stone behind me, and the next I was standing in a field, empty still, not even birds above. My camera was clutched in my hand, but the screen was blank now. The red light had gone out. I looked around for the road, the Jeep, any sign I had actually driven into the mountains of West Virginia. There was nothing, just hills, grass, and silence. Not even ruins. The town of Dunwich Hollow hadn't just vanished again. It had been erased. from memory, from time, from reality, but not from me, the return to the world. Somehow, I found my way back to civilization, hiked for miles through forests that felt unfamiliar in every direction. When I stumbled into a gas station on the edge of Fayette County, I must have looked like a ghost. Dirt-streaked, eyes sunken, voice hoarse. I tried to explain what had happened, about the town, the people, the mine. The clerk looked at me blankly, said there's never been a town by that name. Not around here. Not ever. Even when I pulled out my phone and showed him the footage, all I saw on the screen was static. Every file on the memory card had been corrupted, all but one. A single video, 11 minutes and 11 seconds long, titled The Sacrifice, the forgotten video. I waited until I got home before I watched it. My apartment felt alien after all I'd seen, sterile, cold, distant. I closed the blinds, locked the doors, dimmed the lights. I needed to be ready for whatever the recording might show. I pressed play. The screen was black at first. Then a dimly lit room, the chapel beneath the mine, the pulpit, the altar, a shape standing in the shadows. My voice came through the speakers, quiet and trembling. If anyone finds this, don't go looking. Don't dig. Don't listen for the bell. Then a figure stepped into frame. Me, but not me. His eyes were darker, skin paler, a scar beneath his right eye that I didn't have. Not then. He smiled. Too late, he whispered. You're already part of it. Then the bell rang. Once, twice, 3 times. The screen shattered into static, a growing pattern. Over the next few weeks, things changed. Small things at first. Reflections that didn't quite match. Street signs with letters rearranged. Familiar voices saying unfamiliar things. I started dreaming in places I'd never been. Long tunnels. A sky with no stars. Eyes blinking open inside the moon. And in every dream, I heard the bell. Tolling once. Twice. Each time louder than before. And then I found the second journal. The second journal. It was sitting on my desk when I returned from a walk. Bound in old leather, identical to one from the house in Dunwich Hollow, but the pages were blank. Until I touched it, words bled into the page like ink rising through skin. You ended the loop. You broke the ritual. But the hollow doesn't sleep. It waits. Always. You became its echo. And now others will hear. The rest of the journal filled slowly, over days. Every time I opened it, more pages were written. Names. Places, coordinates, and always a single date beside them. October 30th, the final realization. I finally understood. Dunwich Hollow didn't vanish. It moved, or maybe grew, like a tumor to the folds of time, attaching itself to new places, new people. It fed on fear, memory, curiosity, and when enough had been gathered, it would rebuild itself, somewhere else, with new victims. And now I was its herald, its chosen, not a survivor, not even a witness, but a vessel. Tonight is October 29th. There's a knock at my door every hour, on the hour, always soft, always patient. I don't answer. I know who it is. It's them, the people of Dunwich Hollow, the ones I left behind, or maybe the ones who never left me. The bell is here now. I don't know how. Maybe it always was. I found in my closet, cloaked in shadow, tall and ancient, with no rope, no clapper. It doesn't need one. It rings in the mind, and I know what happens next. Tomorrow, when the clock strikes midnight, someone else will find this journal, this story, maybe in a video, a podcast, a dream, and they'll go looking for Dunwich Hollow, and they'll hear it too. The bell tolls, and the hollow wakes. Final line, the town never vanished. It just moved into you. And in part 5, final chapter, 2000 words. Let me know if you like a bonus epilogue, script formatting for narration, or help adapting the story into a video or audio drama. You said, give me a prompt to generate a horror image of about the small town that vanished overnight horror story. ChatGPT said, sure, Here's a detailed horror image generation prompt you can use to visualize the small town that vanished overnight horror story. Brain prompt for horror image generation. A desolate small town in the Appalachian Mountains, shrouded in thick fog under a dark, stormy sky. Abandoned houses line the cracked main street, their windows glowing faintly with an unnatural red light. A decrepit church stands at the end of the road, its bell tower broken and tilting, with dark, shadowy figures standing still in the mist. The forest surrounding the town appears to be closing in, with twisted trees leaning toward the center. In the distance, barely visible, is a massive, monstrous eye opening the clouds above the town. The atmosphere is eerie, silent, and foreboding, as if time itself is frozen. Cinematic lighting, high detail, dark color palette, horror realism. Let me know if you want variations, e.g. found footage style, night vision filter, aerial view, etc., or if you'd like me to generate it for you.